Hi guys, today we're going to talk how to become an N8N Pro. I can show you my scenario that I've built for one of my clients, and they paid me around 2K for this scenario, and it's about generating landing pages with AI. We generate page, content and images there. So as you can see, to build this complex scenario, you need to know how to work with aggregate nodes, split out, loops, custom HTTP request, webhooks, how to write code, and how to use if node and other nodes. To do that, you need to know a lot, and this is what I'm gonna teach you today and in the next video. Today we're gonna check these topics. It's HTTP request and webhooks. It's the basis of everything in the internet. And in any automation, you will work with basically with HTTP requests and webhooks. And we will check also some basics of N8N, simple expressions and simple nodes. So let's get started. How the internet actually works. When you're trying to open Google's website, you actually send an HTTP request to Google server, and the server responds you with HTML page. Also, if you will try to reach some site that doesn't really exist, for example this one, you will get error because this server doesn't exist, or this page or this domain doesn't exist, and you will get 404 error. 404 is the status of response. If you request right, then you will get 200 status as response. Also, some of requests requires authorization. Sometimes you will have 404 error because your authorization is missing. You can't access all servers in the internet because some of them are private. As we already saw, a server responds you with HTML page, but it also can respond you with JSON or binary data when you're trying to upload file. This is how people use browser and how people behave in the internet. But machines do a different way. If you need to automate some actions with some of services like Gmail, Slack or Airtable, for example, you need to use API. API is a list of endpoints that you can trigger to access data from the service. Most of interactions through API, it's about data. You can add data, you can update data or delete. So usually you send requests to server to trigger some database functions or server functions. Usually services has API documentation that contains data about how to authorize in servers, what kind of requests are possible, and examples of response for these requests. For example, here you can see how API documentation looks like for Airtable. We see here example of request, authorization. You usually need to provide your secret key, and this is example of response. It's JSON that you will get as response for this request. Also, I have a pro tip for you. Even if service doesn't have public API as a Gamma app, for example, you can try to find it with Chrome Developer tool. You can click Command F12 and get access to this Chrome Developer tool. Here we see that there's a bunch of different tabs, and we actually need network tab. As you can see, Gamma API sending some requests every a few minutes, and you can see it's request URL, Gamma app, API, events, and method, and all data about requests. So even service doesn't have public API, some of them has hidden API, and you can get access to these API without big problems. But be aware, because sometimes it's not really legible, but it depends on the case. So what is N8N? This is a no-code tool with a simple visual builder that you can use to create complex automation chains using different APIs and sending HTTP requests. For example, you can see here how you can use Monday API with code. So you need to provide URL, you need to provide authorization key, you will get some response, and then you will be able to use it further in the code. Or you can simply use Monday node in N8N, and that will save you a ton of time because it's easy to add more nodes further and use data from response for your needs. So in N8N you have a list of apps with the predefined requests. Sometimes it's missing a few requests from public APIs, sometimes missing a lot of requests, but you always can do your own request with HTTP request node. And this is what we will do in a few minutes. Also, you can easily set up credentials for our app, because sometimes it can be quite tricky, especially with OAuth 2 authorization. So N8N simplified many steps in building automations. That's why many people use it daily. But instead of teaching how predefined requests works, I want to teach you how to work with the raw HTTP request and webhooks. Because to build complex solutions like I showed you before, you need to know all basics about these things that will help you to build really powerful and scalable solutions. Let's get started with HTTP request. It has different parameters like method, URL, query, header, and body, and we will go through all of them to understand what's going on there. So, method. When you send in a request to server, it will try to understand what do you want to do. And the same URL can have different methods, and depends on the method, server will run different functions. For example, if you want just to get some data, you will use get method. If you want to add data, and sometimes post method also used as get method, you need to use post method. Usually you need to provide some details about what actually you want to add. Put for update, patch for update data partly, because put sort of rewrite the whole record, and delete it's for deleting data. Next thing is URL. URL contains a few parts. It's domain, its path to page, and type of protocol. Usually it's HTTP or HTTPS. S means secure. And as you can see, every symbol here is matter. Because if you, for example, trying to retrieve some data and forget about S, or you may forget about some other symbol in the URL, then server will return you the error. Also, URL can contain query. Query will be at the end of the path. So here we don't have a path to page, we have a pure domain, and we need to use special symbols to clarify query parameters. Query parameters is one of methods how you can send some data to the server. You can send it with query, or you can send it in the body. Also, you can specify some data in headers, but usually to use for metadata. So to create query, you need to use question mark, then you need to specify key and value. For example, here key is item 1 and value for item 1 is text. Then if you want to add additional parameters, you can add and mark and use another pair of key and value. Headers are usually used for authorization, to provide your key or cookie sometimes as authorization, and also to specify content type. Because you can send different type of data in your body, you need to specify content type that will help to understand server how these data should be parsed. There are a few types of body that can be sent. For example, it's JSON. In this case, you need to specify content type application JSON. And JSON looks like that. JSON is a way to organize your data and provide complex structure. Also, you can send some data with form URL encoded. Usually it looks like query. And also you can use form data. Usually you will need to use this content type for sending binary data. Let's go and try to make simple request in N8N. So I have a demo table in Airtable and I want to get this data in N8N with the custom HTTP request. To do that, I need to go to Builder Hub and create API key. You can create token here, N8N demo lesson, for example, and you need to specify scope. Not all services require specifying scopes for your token, but in Airtable you need to specify scope to prevent data leak and different problems if you will lost or someone will have access to your token. We need to choose base also, and yeah, we can create token, we can copy this token and open documents for Airtable. So here you can see usually documents has all data that you need. So we need to use this request to get our data, and also we need to use header authorization. Usually, most common authorization will be done with this authorization header plus bearer, then you will have space and your secret API token. In N8N, you will create a new workflow, and then you need to click here and choose HTTP request. Actually, I've already prepared one, so I choose method get because we have this in documentation. And then I specified URL. Also, we need to specify header. Here it's authorization, and then bearer and our API key. Let's test the step. You can test node, but be aware, because if you will have additional nodes before your node, it will be run and all nodes before your node will be triggered too. If it's alone, you can simply test it and get your data. So there's a few views of output. It's table, schema, and JSON. I prefer to use JSON because it's easier to understand what's going on here. As you can see, we got a list of records. It's array. You can see it's array, and this array contains list of objects. So this is how JSON works. We need to use these curly brackets to specify object, and in the object you have keys and values, the same as we had in query. So key is always a string, and value could be different things. It could be text, data specified as text, number, it could be float or integer number. It also could be Boolean value, it will be true or false. And also it could be another object, another array, and yeah, basically this is what you need to know now. For custom HTTP request, it's better to create a generic credential type for authentication, because if you provide it as a header parameter, it's not secure. To move this authorization to secure type of authentication, we simply need to choose one of the type, and in our case it's a header. Then you need to click create new credential. Here we specify value that we copied, and here we specify the key of header authorization. You need to click save, and then we can delete this header and test it again. As you can see, it works. This output result is actually saved in the execution. Every time you run this scenario automatically or manually, anytime you test it, you will create new execution. When you open execution, you see your scenario here. You can edit it, but you can open each node and see output result. Sometimes it can be buggy and you can see wrong data or see nothing at all, but most of the time it works well, and yeah, you can see the data that you get in this execution. Right now we have a simple node. It won't work itself. It requires a trigger, because every fork flow starts with trigger. If you click here, check add another trigger, or it's a new trigger if it's a new scenario without triggers, you will see a list of possible triggers. One of them is trigger manually. It usually works when you don't want to trigger this workflow automatically and you just want to open this workflow and trigger it when you need it. Other options you have, it's schedule. This is what I usually use on Webhook. On form submission, you can deal with chat and other ways. So right now we need to webhook call. Let's add it and go back to our presentation. So what is webhooks? Webhooks catch this data that we send with HTTP requests and return some response on your HTTP request, so you see some data. It means that requests and webhooks are linked and they have the same parameters. Webhooks also have methods, and they check if your HTTP request aligned with webhook method, otherwise it will return you error. Also, they check your authorization, and if it's wrong, it will again return you error. And it can respond you with different type of data. It could be HTML, for example, when you go to Google, it's HTML. It can return binary data, JSON, or redirect you to another page. Let's go back and check how it works. So we added webhook. This webhook has own test URL and production URL. Test URL will work when you click listen to test event, and at this moment you need to send your HTTP request. Then you will get it, and you will be able to see output results. Otherwise, you need to use a production URL. Also, you need to specify HTTP method. Usually it's a GET, but some of services, for example assembly, requires POST method, and sometimes it's not clear from the documentation. So you can test different methods if your webhook doesn't work. Other thing here is authentication. Again, usually if you use third-party services, you don't need to set up any authentication here, but if you use it for internal use, for example, between different workflows or between, for example, Bubble and N8N, this is how I use it, it's better to set up a header authentication, the same that we made for Airtable, where you can specify a name, actually it can be different name, not only authorization, and some value. And anytime you will do HTTP request, you need to specify this authentication, otherwise you will get 404 error. Last but not the least thing, it's a respond. So usually you will use using respond to webhook node, because this way you can return some data. Otherwise, immediately it will return to 100 status. You can see it here, response code. And server that made HTTP request will know that his request was made right. So let's create simple pair of webhook and webhook respond. And you will understand how it works. We will delete this one and we will add some respond. Also, you can respond with some data. For example, it's text, JSON, binary data. We will use text, and this is a body. And actually you can provide here not only text but pure HTML. For example, I want to say hello world. Then you need to click save. Don't forget to activate your workflow, and you will be able to use it with production URL. We click here and we'll try to test it. Yeah, don't forget to change respond to using respond to webhook now, and save and test it. Yeah, as you can see, it's hello world. I want to actually make it bold. Let's check if HTML works. So you can use HTML tags. It's B for bold. Then you need to save, go back and reload page. Yeah, now it's bold. Great. So let's go back. And if you like this video, please leave the comment. What do you want to see in the next part? Because there's a lot of things that will be covered in the next part, and that you need to build really complex stuff. It's working with items, it's work with code. Actually, it's quite more complex that I showed to you, because you need to use pagination sometimes, you need to use different authorization types. Yeah, and subscribe to the channel. Let's continue. So let's improve our simple scenario and learn how JSON and JS functions works in N8N. Right now, we are not sending any data to our webhook. Let's fix it. I just want to send a few query parameters. So I need question mark, then I want to have name equal Mark, and then I will send it to you. Nothing changed here. But if we will go back and check our executions, we will see that this webhook got query, and this query contains our key and value. So I want to return not simply hello world, but I want to return hello Mark. How I can do that? For that, you need to use expressions. With expressions, you can map data from previous node. Actually, we also forget about one important stuff that improve your test workflow process. You can go to execution, you can open executed node, and you can copy output. Why we need it? So we click copy and go back to editor. For example, right now in the expression, you see nothing, because to see something here, you need to execute previous node, get some data, and only after that you will see some data that you can map and provide in the next node. Instead of it, you can just open this node, click this pencil and paste our output from previous execution. Click save, and now let's go back here. Voila, we have a webhook data, and you can see JSON. And yeah, we can choose the key that we need and simply move it here. How it works: usually if you use data from previous node will be named as $sign and JSON. And then, if you delete it, you see this object. It's the whole object from here to here. And these objects have multiple keys. To choose needed key, you can add dot, and then you will see list of fields that inside this object. Actually, I need a query. Inside the query, it's object, and I need to get name key. And I click dot name, and then voila, I have a mark, and it means that data mapped successfully. Now we can go back, save this scenario, and open our tab here. Yep. Now it's Mark. For example, if I will change it to Philipp. Great, we have a website that could access anyone in the whole world, and we can show them something. Actually, it's a small Easter egg about next topic of the video, because I'm gonna show you how to generate websites on the fly with AI and N8N. Yeah. So stay tuned. Now let's go back here. Great, awesome. We have a dynamic website and we can respond with some data. Let's improve it even more. I want to add here HTTP request and return some data from the table. For example, again, we see nothing. We need to click. Because we have pinned data, in this case, this node won't be run when I click test here. Otherwise, we can, for example, unpin this data, and if you click test step, you will see that nothing happens because we are waiting to execute. We are waiting for some feedback here. If it was a simple HTTP request, it will run HTTP request again. If it's webhook, it will wait for colon test URL. So to prevent this behavior, we just need to save some data here, pin, and then we will simply step and get some result. Again, we click pin data here, and then we'll be able to use this data in webhook respond. So I want to actually return address from first record. Now let me show how it works here. So we will just drag and drop this address here, and you see that records is 0. 0 is item index, so each item in the array has own index, and it's start with 0 in JavaScript. So right now we will return this address, but I want to add data from webhook with my name. How I can do that? I can simply do it like that, and then I have my name and I have address. Otherwise, I can use inline JavaScript function. It's a big topic, it's a big and complex topic actually, but I will show you simple function here. So we have my name, we have an address, and for example, I want to replace Texas with Mark. How I can do that? I need to add to my string like dot, and then we can specify some function. For example, it will be replace, and in replace function, you see description of the function. First of all, we need to specify what we want to replace. It will be Texas, and then we will specify what will be replaced with. It's my name. Now we see that we have address and mark. This is how inline.js functions works, and actually you can build multi-line big function with different array processing, complex objects, JSON stuff, and I'm actually building really complex and long expressions. Another way you can do it with the code node, but if you need to simply create long string, usually you need to do that working with AI. And then it's easier to use expression inline functions. That's all for today. Thank you for joining me today, and join our community 5MinAI if you want to be like a homer, and also click like and subscription, because soon I will create a new part with the more complex stuff about N8N and AI agents. Thank you for joining. Bye.